we were not supposed to be in conversation, like using the structure that was set before. And so us talking is revolutionary. Us taking up space, us using our voices is revolutionary. There's a reward in that, but it's not easy. It's difficult. It's very difficult to take up space when the system wasn't built for you.
It's Uncommon Good, the program where we talk with ordinary people doing uncommon good in service of our common humanity. I'm Paulie Reese. Y'all, incredibly honored, excited, amazed that I got to have a conversation with the brilliant Tarik Davis. Tarik, a filmmaker, a screenwriter, an improviser, a sketch comic. He's a multi-hyphenate. His previous credits include the Iliza Scheslinger Sketch Show on Netflix, Baby Wants Candy, the improvised stage musical, Freestyle Love Supreme, his own independent horror film, Page One, which you can find on YouTube, Late Night with Seth Myers, and these days, you can see him as the co-host of the Amber Ruffin Show on Peacock. We talk about so many things, but in particular, our mutual penchant for 90s nostalgia. I might have worn a very special t-shirt for him. Growing up in New Jersey, his love of horror films, dealing with long COVID, and the work of taking up space in the entertainment industry. Y'all, this conversation is incredible. Please enjoy. I wanted to get us started. One of the things that we share in common and have talked about in the past is our love of so many things pop culturally in the 90s. I wore a special t-shirt for you today.
Oh, you did? Lovely. Nice.
I wore an original production team t-shirt for the Fox Television, very short-lived Philadelphia run of Family Double Dare, originally filmed at what is now the NPR studios in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, WHYY. And I wanted to say, do you have, among so many things, do you have any favorite like 90s nostalgia pieces that you own, that you remember, that light you up, that would be an ideal like improv monologue thing to talk about?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I've been strangely, I guess this is it's not so strange when you get older. You look back fondly on those simpler times. Yeah. For me, I will get lost. There's some, feeds on Instagram that show like old commercials, like old
Yes.
high C. Like remember the high C drink, like
Yes.
just I will. Or on YouTube, I will go like I can get lost for a very long time going down a rabbit hole of watching like those commercials. Like the things that we considered very disposable to me are very precious right now. It's like, man, we advertise a lot of sugar.
Yes. So were you an Ecto Cooler kind of man?
Ecto Cooler wasn't my favorite. I do remember it was being really excited when that new flavor came out. Being a Ghostbusters fan myself.
Yeah.
But the flavor I was that, it was more just like a thing at the lunch table that you're like, oh, he's got the Ecto Cooler. Like, but it wasn't my favorite flavor. But yeah, I grew up in that era of like, every lunch I had a high C or a Capri Sun, and luckily I didn't get diabetes while I was in elementary school. But yeah, that and seeing the Family Double Dare shirt reminds me just of like Mark Summers, and then they would tell you like what the family won, and it was like all these products that we would just be sold. I know there are problematic aspects of that, but something about that time and watching those commercials are very endearing to me. They're very comforting.
I remember in particular like Eastpak, like the backpacks.
Yeah.
really, really terrifying looking rollerblades, a phone shaped like Garfield the cat.
Yep. I had a phone that was like a break-in case of emergency phone in my room,
Yeah.
but it came in like it was so unnecessary. It was so all this plastic around, but I loved it. Yeah, you know that would be I miss my room. My room in the '90s is a thing. I think I if I could step into a portal of just my room,
Mm.
that would be a real treat.
I think there is an adult version of Space Camp. And that was like the grand prize always. If you could go to Space Camp as an adult, would you?
Only if Leah Thompson would be there. Um, I said that out loud, but yeah, I Space Camp the movie was I yeah I had the biggest crush on Leah Thompson, and that kind of superseded my nerd interest in Space Camp. It was maybe they went hand in hand. Now as a grown man, and I think I'm a little bit more. I'm wise enough to say no. My genuine interest in Space Camp isn't really going to space as far. Uh,
Is it for you? Is it like Howard the Duck Leah Thompson, or Back to the Future Leah Thompson, or like Back to the Future 2 Leah Thompson?
Great question. I mean, Back to the Future was my introduction,
Yeah.
and she's great in that movie. It's a very awkward role now,
Yeah.
looking back. Um, but yeah, I mean, I would say Back to the Future. Howard the Duck was very confusing to me as a child because I was just like, now I think it's pretty revolutionary and great, but like then I was just like, how does this work? Like and there weren't many conversations about anything even encroaching like sexuality, much less
Yeah.
trained species sexuality. So like I was just like, how is this? But she's full on in love with this duck. Oh, okay. Um, it was a very yeah, it was one of those things that like there were a lot of things of the '80s and '90s that a lot of things that were disturbing any period, but I feel like along with those commercials of selling sugar and
Yeah.
thinking back on my parents and thinking back on like there were a lot of things that we were sold that I really feel like we didn't know how to feel about, especially
Yeah.
parents, and so it was kind of like a shrug of like, they say it's for kids. And Howard Duck is definitely like, yeah, that comic was not for kids,
Yeah.
and they were trying to do, it's a lot more subversive, and I think the film was trying to figure out that middle ground, and it comes across weird, but that's what I love about that period of time.
For me, admittedly, the failure of Howard the Duck for me is not necessarily a failure of like the universe of the film, but for me it's a failure of imagination. The
Hmm.
first like 11, 12 times that I saw it, yes, I've seen Howard the Duck 11 or 12 times at a very
Nice.
young age, and recently as well. And the same question applies. Um, why is a duck's bill made out of plastic?
Right, right, right. Yeah, I mean, it was a movie of its time.
Yeah.
There were so many
Yeah.
other like weird. I remember my mom taking me to see the Garbage Pails Kids movie, and like another
Yes.
one,
Yes.
very strange film that it's one of those films that the studio actively tries to bury and pretends doesn't exist, but it did. I was in the movie theater in Westfield, New Jersey, watching that, and yeah, it was kind of a lack of imagination. I will say though, in execution, there's a lack of imagination. But I'm thinking of this clip, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was of Frank Zappa,
Mm,
and he was talking about his musical career and like the weirdness of his music and how that was allowed to come out into the public. And he was like, yeah, you got to understand when I started making music and the people who greenlit me or the executives who let me in were like these
yeah.
cigar chomping, like old white guys,
Yeah.
but and who had no imagination. But they
Yeah.
did have all right, I don't know what this is. throw it out there, see if it works. And he's like, that's the only way he was allowed in.
Yeah.
And the system changed, and it changed in like the late 60s, 70s when like instead of that cigar chumping like Ed Asner looking white guy, and I
Yeah.
love Ed Asner by the way, R.I.P. But
Hmm.
it turned into like the young hippie, the young hip guy,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that guy that guy brought in judgment. That guy was like, actually, I don't know if this is where like what's I don't think this is what I would like or people like me would like. They would like this. And there's something lost in the person who doesn't know what something is but tries to throw it up on a wall.
Yeah.
And I say all that to explain Howard the Duck and Garbage Pail Kids. And I don't think we're making projects like that today because
Yeah.
they wouldn't even get past the judgment stage. Like it'd be like, well, is this hip? As opposed to throw it out there and see what sticks. And to me, that's a lot more exciting of an approach to art
Yeah.
than I don't know. I think these people would like this, if that makes sense.
I think so. There are plenty of things I think that I've seen as you're describing from that era in particular, where and I think we just came through one from the pandemic,
Right.
because people had to be like, we can't make more than this.
Right.
We have to make this. Um, I
Right.
One of the things that I think of in particular, I'm a big fan of British panel shows and that sort of style of humor, where there's a gentle premise that's largely unimportant, but is the container in which funny people can do silly dumb things,
Right.
like the conceit of improv, um,
Right.
which I'm sure we'll get to very directly at some point, but I saw more chances being taken like that,
Mm.
during the pandemic,
Yeah.
in every format. Um, like I think of content that was on major Big Four networks that was centered around Zoom relationships. I think of like many like prime like days like Wednesdays and Thursday nights that were taken up by reboots of dumb shows that probably didn't need to like live beyond their initial runs in the first place.
Hmm.
And I'm grateful that someone took a chance, that we just didn't air reruns of like Scrubs or Friends or Perfect Strangers or
Yeah. And there's a place for like the nostalgia of those things,
yeah.
but I do think what happened in the pandemic was, you know, the all of our, the floor was taken from under us, right? And
Yeah.
so strangely, everyone was not on a level playing field, but everyone was experiencing a similar thing,
Yeah.
which doesn't happen a lot for all of us with all of the divided attention that we have. For all of us to be experiencing something in the same moment
Yeah.
that's serious, that's threatening, that's scary, it's confusing. Um, and what happens in that is I think there was a bit of an erosion of you know status of clout chasing doesn't mean anything
Yeah.
in the height of the pandemic, because it's the most important person with clout is Dr. Fauci, right? It's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
what's on that person's Instagram feed? That's what's important for that very brief period of time, and it was very brief. And so yeah, and in that, I think I can speak for myself, like that sitting at home, being still,
Yeah.
um, being present, not having a schedule to do a million and one things. As terrifying as it was, there was something very grounding and lovely
Mm.
about it, and artistically fulfilling. Like I just
Yeah.
remember, like, oh, I get to sit and my imagination can go wild because that's a safe place for me to go.
Mm.
And I feel like I'm perhaps not alone in that.
I love that phrase, like the safety of your imagination. and
Mhm.
like that being a place where you can just sort of like roam free, take chances, make mistakes. um do you have any like specific practices that like help keep that a safe place, that maintain it as this like beloved, life-giving, like that help protect it?
Yeah, I strangely I wrote an Instagram no, a Twitter post yesterday that I tweeted, and I don't tweet often. I'm trying to
Yeah.
tweet more. I don't know why I'm trying, but I am. Um, but I wrote like the 3 M's that are meaningful to me for my mental health, for my
Yeah.
like well-being, and they were masking up,
Mm,
meditation,
mm.
and minding my business. And there's like a wink and a nod, like everything is cute now, right? Quote unquote cute. But in all seriousness, to answer your question, there's so much out here, and there's so much I've gone through so much, but there's
Yeah.
also the world is a lot, right? And so
Yeah.
for me, the thing that I really I key into, especially when I'm feeling my lowest or feeling a little tapped out creatively, is just kind of bringing it back to
Mhm.
self, kind of shutting all that out, and yeah, and like doing that thing of in meditation, and by not jumping in on whatever new trend is going on, but really focusing on like, well, what was it about the Saturday mornings that made me feel, not just safe but special
Yeah.
and alive and excited, revisiting that feeling. I can't go back in time, but I can go back to that feeling. I can go back to that feeling of watching Back to the Future with my family and hearing. We all know that chime that Zemeckis put in the film, that very special chime. Every time I hear it,
Yes.
it's something. There's something about, and for me, film, very much my first love. There's something about that I'm very fortunate hasn't tapped out for me. That
Mm.
excitement, and then wanting to take that, like, oh, how do I do that? How do I create that excitement? How do I create something that elevates the moment? And if I have to do it if it's only in my screenplay, or if it's only in
Yeah.
a book that I wrote, or a silly Instagram webcomic, or a online Zoom play, or a sketch, an improv scene, um, that's been my life pursuit. My life pursuit
Mm.
is to create that feeling, that elevated moment, to be a part of it. Um, so another kid can be like, "Oh man," and
Yes.
revisit that, and then they create that, and then like it just keeps going on,
Yes.
you know?
I hear a desire to just create a container where those beautiful things can happen.
Yeah, I mean that's what art to me is.
Mm.
They are containers of different moments. For some people, they are containers to be like, "Hey, this is a traumatic moment, and it's important that we recognize it." Right? It's like, yeah, it
Yeah.
is. And there are people who like excel at containing those emotions, those moments for us to share, um, and feel that. For
Mm.
me, that Saturday morning feel is the thing that I've been still chasing. Especially today when like, yeah, we are so everything, tensions are so divided.
Yeah.
The meaning of films is in flux right now, and art. Um, but to me, that doesn't the meaning of humanity hasn't changed. So
Mm.
yeah, how do we still get excited? We still want to be connected. We still want to um, find out what this is all about. And I feel like the best way to do that is like, through the mythic elevated adventure.
Yes.
Just matters which platform you're trying
Yes.
to tell that story on.
You specifically mentioned Saturday morning. Were you a cartoons person?
I was a huge Saturday morning cartoons person. I was Saturday morning cartoons all the way up into 2011
Mm,
when Pix 11 or CW Kids when they finally went off the air.
damn.
That was the last. That was like the last official like aired Saturday morning. But yeah, no, that was my like special time.
Do you have any standout favorite series?
You hear a lot of people, they'll talk about the big ones, um, but the ones that stuck with me were usually the small ones that kind of went away. Love Muppet Babies. I mean, Gargoyles was dope. I'm in the end of middle school, beginning of high school when that
Mm.
happened. Same with Batman the animated series. That was
Ugh,
like
mm.
uh, when I was in middle school and drawing and trying and like uh, drawing comic book art and going to the comic book store and um, I love Batman the animated series. But the thing about Gargoyles was it was the first cartoon I remember on that level that was like, oh, Detective Montoya, she's biracial, she's half indigenous and
Yes.
half black, and that is an actual part of her identity. She talks about it's important,
Yes.
and then they go into the mythology of, and her mother was specifically, I don't know if she was from Kenya or, but like they went into the mythologies of her father's indigenous culture and then
Yes.
her mother's. Um, and then it was voiced, the main Goliath was voiced by Keith David, a black actor. And
Mm.
I remember there was an episode where Goliath, this huge, gargoyle, turns human, and I was expecting him to, be a white guy, and no, they retained the race. He's black when he's human, and I just remember being like, okay, they're making choices. I'm old enough to see
Yes.
you're making specific choices here, and I appreciate it. Um, I was getting into Shakespeare at that time, and Macbeth was a huge recurring character,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, yo, this show is hitting all of my nerd shit. Like it's hitting everything that I'm like, and doing it well. Huge into mythology, still am, and I'm sure that show also helped foster that love even further. But like, it was like, yeah, this show, they uh, went in on the Knights of the King Arthur and Avalon
Mm.
and 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 the Fae, and just really like we're going in on some strange stuff. Um, right at the perfect time for me in the '90s, early '90s. So it was just
Yeah.
like, this is all I want. Um,
Mm.
and then it did become a Saturday morning cartoon on ABC and the third season, which they ruined it. It was a different writer, production team, and
Yeah.
no, people don't consider it canon. But yeah, Saturday mornings like that. To go back to that, um, yeah, there was just something about it was both my parents worked, and it was a different feel in the house. My mom worked nights, my dad worked during the day,
Mm.
but they were both home Saturday mornings, so that air around the house was different. Um, having waking up to the smell of breakfast,
Oof.
cleaning, and then being able to watch cartoons until one of my friends came over, was like, all right, let's go outside. And then you played outside for
Yes,
the
you
rest of the day.
did.
And
Yes,
then
you
like
did.
so it was Saturdays to me were just like the perfect day. It was
Mm.
um played outside and then until the light came on and then came on home and it was Saturday. So mom was making a great dinner or we would have family over and
Mm.
that meant we were all and Saturday nights was, Saturday night at 8 was movie night. So it was like, okay, I'm primed. I am primed for everything. So like uh yeah, those Saturday nights where like my whole family would come over because we were the family that had the VCR
You were the Joneses.
Yeah, we had the VCR, and yeah, so I was set up for the love of film.
Mm.
I had a very warm place for that, and yeah, and my parents let me, they were. I didn't grow up in a household where there was a lot edited.
Mm.
Language,
Mm.
emotions, attitude. Um, but that also meant that, like, family night, like, just because it was an adult movie
Yeah.
didn't mean I had to leave the room. I'm watching
Yeah.
with everyone else. Only stipulation was I had to understand what I was watching. That was
Yeah.
like the rule. Like, my dad was like, "You understand what's going on? All right, explain." And I would explain. So, I just kind of became a fan, a performer, all in that. Like,
Yeah.
that was kind of my incubation. That it.
There's something special about specifically taking time and like being excited about getting up on a Saturday, or that just sparkly golden hour of like 3 to 5 p.m. on like a weekday afternoon. Like,
Yep.
and you didn't know like which episodes were going to be on, so it was a little
Mm-mm.
bit of a surprise. Like,
A little bit of surprise. Yeah, it was very precious.
mm,
It was very precious. It's like you don't. Yeah, there's streaming now. Yeah, I don't know if I could explain to a kid then. It's just like you just got what you got, and you were happy to get it. Um, didn't if there was a cliffhanger, one episode next week, there's no guarantee that it's the part two. Like,
exactly.
unless it was a Stephen King like movie special,
Yeah.
that those are the only times you knew. Like, all right, when they say next week, they mean
Yeah.
next week.
Like Storm of
Everything
the
else,
Century, or
yeah,
yeah,
yep.
yeah, yeah.
Give me what I want and I'll go away. Yeah, I remember that shit.
Ugh.
Combe Fiore, man.
Yes.
Canada's own.
I think, I mean, we've worked on a couple of things. Like, I had the privilege of helping to produce a little Zoom play of yours. I've had the great enjoyment of listening to some of your other work, seeing you on stage. I reckon that you're a bit of a horror enthusiast. Is that
Hmm.
correct?
Yeah.
Tell me where the love comes from.
The love of horror came from, I was a very shy, uh, introverted kid, tons of social anxiety.
Yeah.
Didn't know it at the time. Um, but everything was very scary. I was the youngest and was a small kid for a long time.
Mm.
Um, and there are a whole bunch of things about that I'm sure, like, that my therapist, that we're still unpacking. Um, but you know things that I consciously knew and unconsciously knew at the same time, being
Yeah.
black and being in this suburb that felt both safe, but then was also clear moments of, oh, we're in danger.
Yeah.
This isn't safe. And like the cognitive dissonance between that, of trying to figure that out from like 3 years old, of like, oh wow, this everything feels safe. Wait a minute, nothing is safe, right? So you have all that, and um, I remember the first movie I ever saw,
Mm.
the first movie in the movie theater I ever saw, and I was maybe like three, or had to be like three. It was at a drive-in. This is my first memory. I don't know if it was the first movie, but my
Mm.
first clear memory was my parents taking me and my brother to a drive-in to see the movie Blue Thunder, which was like an
Ooh.
action movie starring Roy
Yeah.
Scheider, and like he's a helicopter pilot. And I remember watching it, and I'm in the back seat, and I'm small enough where I remember the car was big, so I could like move around, right? So I had to be like three. So
Mhm.
that's the movie playing, but behind us, being that it's a drive-in, there was another movie that you could see the screen, just couldn't hear it, and it was a horror movie, and it was the most horrific, bloody, gory thing. I don't know what it. Cannot remember what the movie is to this day. I just remember this small child got wrecked, got murdered, and my mom kept trying to get me to turn around, but I was like, fascinated. And that was kind of the start of something. And it was horrifying. And I remember like hating it and being grossed out by it. And like not having the vocabulary to be like, a child died on screen? Children aren't supposed to die, right? And having all
Yes.
those thoughts.
Yes.
And uh I f- I believe it was the movie, and it's still my favorite horror movie to this day, Fright Night.
Oof.
And like I had a real disdain from horror from like that point. And then like I remember seeing the movie Fright Night, which came out I think in 1985, 84, 85, 86, somewhere in those 3 years. Um, and it's about this guy, this teenager, who's finds out his neighbor's a vampire, and no one will believe him. And he enlists the help of this horror movie TV host, Peter Vincent, played by the great Roddy McDowall,
Yeah. Oh.
who specializes in killing vampires on screen, but in reality, he's just like, oh, look, I'm just an actor. And he's like, listen, this guy's a vampire, and the actor, finds out he's telling the truth and helps him. And that movie twisted everything for me because it was like, oh, if something's scary, and if you follow the rules, you identify it, and you follow the rules, you can defeat it.
Hmm.
If you follow like there are rules to defeating a vampire. Oh, there are rules to beating Freddy Krueger. Oh, there are rules to um beating a werewolf. And like Monster Squad was huge for me. And so that was my way in. The world became a little less scary when I realized you can fight monsters. Um and I know that's not the twist for everybody, but for me that was the Peter Vincent character, the person who was very scared and terrified, but
Mm-hmm.
still um, decided to help this kid. And they use their know-how, they use their intelligence um, to prevail. That was, for me, my way into horror.
Mm.
And it was, they were the steps that I needed. And then, as you get older and you realize, like, in life, there are no rules.
Nope.
And the good guys don't always win. But yeah, that was I kind of developed a love there. And from there it was like, all right, well, what else? What else do I like? Oh, I like zombie films. Oh, I like these old classic films. I love Hammer films. I love which Fright Night was a love letter to. Yeah, I love these Universal movies. Oh, what's this? Oh, this is different. This is blending horror and sci-fi with Alien and The Thing, and
Mm.
like then I became a huge John Carpenter fan.
Oof.
Um,
Mm. Mm.
and so yeah, and it hasn't stopped.
Are there any particular films that you're excited about that feel like a new idea or at least a new take on an
Yeah,
old idea?
yeah. I mean, horror right now is big,
Yes. There's so much.
and it's kind of, I think it's kind of cool. Although, same with the superhero thing, I have my reservations about that. It's like
Mm.
anytime something gets cool, um, I get worried that the people who were part of that community first, if they remain in that
Yeah.
community when it becomes cool, I think
Yeah.
that's an awesome thing, right? No one wants to see the people gentrified out of their passion. Um, and that's kind of my feeling about horror and comic books. Now, having said that, I will add there was a lot of misogyny, homophobia, racism in those communities that needed to be weeded out.
Hmm.
And the communities need to become more inclusive, which they are. But I will also add that horror, like hip hop, people talk about the misogyny of hip hop, and hip hop was also the most progressive musical form of its time,
Yes.
calling that stuff out. Horror to
Yes.
me is the most progressive and was the most progressive. Um, you know, even in those times when people are like, oh, it's just a bunch of of young co-eds running around barely clothed, and I'm like, well, some of that is absolutely true, and some of that is commentary.
Yeah.
Some of
Yeah.
that turns that stuff on its head. Um, watch Sleepaway Camp, and if you see the end of that movie's talking about a whole bunch of things, right? So, um, yeah, I think the movie Men. I just saw. I saw a trailer for it. It's out. That looked like it's doing some stuff that's really exciting. Um, the movie. I know the prequel to the movie X. And they are. I don't like the word. I don't like. I've used the word elevated, but I don't like the term elevating the genre because I don't think it needed it. But they are definitely with this new movie, like thing like Ruby. They are. Oh, horror isn't just It's not like the gross section of the video store that's
Yeah.
close to the porn section anymore.
Is it is it a reinvigoration or perhaps a reframing?
I think a bit of both. I think it's
Mm.
also. I think it's also like reflective of where we are societally, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm not joking. Like, oh, I know what it is. I work in a video store. Like, the horror
Yeah.
section was usually close to the
Yeah.
porn section, right? And those were
Absolutely.
things that our society put on the margins on purpose.
Yeah.
And we kink shamed,
Yeah.
and now people are a lot more comfortable and open with who they are and what they love, who they love. And I think horror is one of those things. So I think like
Mhm.
that's part of the reason why like there's such a embracing of the genre now. My 2 cents of concern, I think that's all beautiful and it's as it should be. My 2 cents of concern is like the things that we always should be concerned about, right? Like greed uh and and like the chasing of status and fame, right? I'm noticing there are a lot of shows about vampires
Yeah.
from the perspectives of vampires, and I think
Yes.
it's fascinating coming out of the pandemic that that's happening, especially considering that like I know so many people, being one of them myself, who got through that and is sick, and I
Yeah.
experienced long COVID, and
Yeah.
uh, you know, I'm one of those people who are like, yeah, let's continue to mask up. This thing isn't gone, and reinfection
Yeah.
can be worse, and you can really, really mess someone up, if not kill someone. Let's take care
Yes.
of each other communally, right? And we were doing that for a bit, and then we stopped. And there are a lot of people who are able-bodied and healthy, and
Yeah.
don't have to worry about that, or don't, or they do, but choose not to. And there are people who, like myself, are actively very concerned about every space we move into, right?
Yeah.
Because we have to be. And I can't uncouple. I haven't articulated it yet, but I think it's very funny that and it's not just like the movie Ruby is she's the killer, right? We're telling these
Yes.
stories from the perspective of the killer. And I think that's cool, but I'm also just like, what is that about that we want to be vampires? That's a society that we want to tell that story from that perspective. Vampires eat people. They're
Yes.
youthful and they're pretty and they don't get old and they are part of the elite. And They go to the best clubs and wear the best clothes, and I understand why it's appealing. Having said that, the sickness of what that represents is deadly.
Yes.
And so what if we focus on the people it's deadly to? Are those stories being told? Anyway, that's kind of that's what I'm seeing in the horror genre right now. I'm also seeing it in the superhero genre, and we really like going after power. We like being pretty, we like being powerful,
Yeah.
and I get it. I want those things too, but at the end of the day, I'm also just this person in this body
Yeah.
that isn't perfect,
Yeah.
that is getting old, that is very human. And there's something super about that. And so I'm also anxious for those stories.
I remember you mentioning some of the struggles of like going through long COVID in the past. We're both working a lot more with Freestyle Love Supreme and the Academy. Now FLS Plus. Thank you, Wayne
Yeah,
Brady. Thank you, Anthony.
yeah,
And
they're
Tommy
doing.
and everybody.
Mhm.
I remember then you describing the struggle of how symptoms just impact in a way. I'm going to use a phrase that I've used to describe my own experience of accident recovery. I wonder if this is something that feels relatable. There are some times that I don't recognize the body that I'm living in.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely relatable. And there's a resentment in that, an anger, a resentment towards self, an anger towards self, a blaming of the body, right?
Yeah.
Um, like what's wrong with you? Why? And to me, that part of the this healing process that I'm still on, and
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate to have a, a really supportive group of people around me, from my
Yeah.
partner to my therapist to my doctors and family. Um, but in that, you got to realize. So just in that one moment where you blame your body, where I blamed myself, right? I'll get angry at myself. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, like mask up, meditation, mind my business.
Yeah.
Um, you're not on your own side, and you need to heal. You literally need to you need to survive, and you're not on your own side. And that figuring that out, that I wasn't on my
Mm.
own side, that I was like longing for the days that like I'd spend hours at the gym. Like 2019, I was a gym rat. Like uh, I was in felt I was in great shape, had muscles, and could do handstands. And 2022, all this stuff is much more difficult. And the muscles aren't as they're not there. Like, um,
Yes.
and so and especially in this world where we're talking about superheroes, and I'm a performer, I'm an actor. Like,
Yeah.
I would love to be in a Marvel movie. I know that would be a challenge, not
Yeah.
impossible. It would be a challenge, but like, you know, uh, as a cishet identifying man, right? We don't talk about kind of our images with body, and
Yeah.
there's a real, you know, issues of masculinity came up in long COVID, and identity, and like, well,
Yes.
who am I if I'm not this? Am I nothing? Do I even want to survive? Like, you go through, you go through a whole gamut of what your identity was tied to physically and what that means to you spiritually and mentally.
Yeah.
And you can end up on the other side of a fence, like not on your own team. And so what I figured out about that was like, well, if I'm not on my own team, it was a real wake up call about what it is to be able bodied, disabled. If those are terms I'm still new to, like
Yeah.
it's a whole world I'm new to. And like,
Yeah.
I do realize that like, oh, it's not, we do not consider those who aren't fit and
Yeah.
it was to it goes back to my love of horror films. Like, you know, the first horror film I wrote that I worked on for over a decade and made a short film, two short films about, and tried to bring the full feature to fruition. And it was just very difficult and led to one of the most difficult chapters of my life trying to make this movie happen. It was all about the black guy that gets killed in horror films, right?
Mm.
Um, the premise was it's called Victim Number One. I made a short film, page one, you could find somewhere on YouTube, uh, on my director's page. Um, at I'll remember in a moment. Jamtown Films, Jamtown Films. You can find that at the Jamtown Films page on YouTube. Anyway, the premise was about this black guy who's the black guy who gets killed in horror films. He's
Yeah.
that one. He's like Sean Bean. He's the actor. Like every role he's cast in, he's the first guy to die.
Yeah.
He's almost like a internet meme, and he's embarrassed by his career, and he wants to quit. And his agent convinces him to do one last film, and he gets on location, agrees to do it, and he's on set, and things really start to happen. People really start to die, and he's able to survive using his knowledge of being killed in other movies that keeps him alive and keeps everyone else on the set alive, right? So it was like a horror comedy. But I bring it up because
Yeah.
to me, horror films were one of the problematic aspects of, there's the trope called the final girl.
Yes.
And I always thought it was interesting because horror films, you'll see, depending on what that film writer director is trying to say, they're telling you who they think is worth living at the end of the film,
Yes. Yes.
who is worthy of life,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Um, and a lot of times I'd watch a film, I'm like, the character that I identify the most with, most times is the black guy, or the black
Yes.
person, or the black person, or the queer person, or the person who's the most
Yes.
humane, the old person, the weak person, who has the most to
Yes.
lose. That person always dies.
Yes.
And to me, that was always the person who had the most life. Like the person who has the most life always dies, and then you know, uh, the woman and her boyfriend live, or just the woman, and it's usually a white woman. And
Yes.
having gotten COVID and feeling like we were all really in this collective horror movie, and worrying and not wanting to be the black guy that dies first or dies at all, and then seeing society in large be like, well, we really care about our healthy, able-bodied white people.
Yeah.
It was I always knew it. It was never something that I was unaware of, but the extra aspect of feeling like I had lost my body
Yeah.
made me even more aware of that. And now to be in the situation where this is a chronic condition,
Yeah.
I'm managing it. I'm on the
Yes.
better end of the spectrum, but it's something that I'm still working at, something I'm still very aware of. And now we're in this our society where, like, any regulations, the masking regulations in subways just got removed. I don't ride the subway
Mm.
anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I have that benefit because of I'm making a decent living right now, but there are people who can't.
Yeah.
People, like, going into the grocery store is a terror.
Yeah.
Going to the pharmacy to get medication that I need, like, not everyone there is wearing a mask. That is a potentially life or death situation for some people. And the larger society just keeps moving along. The movie keeps moving along. And to me, I'm like, some of the best characters died.
Yeah.
And it just gave me a whole perspective on, like, you know, um, I knew people who died of AIDS in the 80s and 90s, right? Going back to that
Right.
time. It
Right.
didn't hit me when I was a kid, but it didn't hit me like it's hitting me now. Like, oh, we lost so much. We lost so much. We lost so many people full of life. that didn't have like, and it was preventable. We're losing people every day, and it's preventable, but we're continuing on. And so I'm just like, huh, yeah, the fact that there's a Vampire Academy and Interview with the Vampire and this vampire show over there, I'm like, yeah, that's it's not surprising to me. And I hate for that to be an indictment of society, but I'm like, yeah, why do we I don't know if the vampire is the person we should center
Yeah.
personally.
What do I so whenever there are pet sounds in a taping, I just call it out. So um what I- do you have a cat?
Yeah, he's meowing. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. What is your cat's name?
Cat. His name is Cat. K-A-T-T.
I I love it. I I'm hoping that is an homage to a particular stand up.
Um, no, it's an homage to the very similar name. You got Cat Williams, but the
Yeah.
inverted William Cat, who played Ralph Hinckley on Greatest American Hero,
Oh,
which was a
oof.
Saturday morning show
Yes.
that I was so that wasn't a cartoon, but it was a show that I loved
Yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah.
Um
Actually,
like
that would be I have like a jean jacket and I have an official Greatest American Hero like actual size patch, and it's on the back of a jean like vest that I have.
that was yeah, no, Saturday morning was a thing for me, like growing up in like the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania, with more sheep than cornfields and more cornfields than people. Um and certainly more people than college degrees. Yeah. Um I think Greatest American Hero, like, what? Gosh, I was like really cognizant of like Saturday morning in like 88, 89. So like that's like just like a tiny bit like before like I was like like I knew like the specialness of that time.
Yeah,
I want to do a little bit of a speed round, a sort of like either or thing. Would
yeah.
love to hear which you prefer and why.
Hmm.
Um Taylor ham or pork roll?
Oh, I'm a vegetarian. Um, if I'm an '80s kid, it's pork roll. Going for
Me.
my '80s kid appetite, where I would still eat something like that, it'd be pork roll.
Yeah. Got you. Ocean City, New Jersey, or Asbury Park?
Ooh, I mean, uh, my high school choir, we went to Ocean City, New Jersey every year to like for I forget some competition. So I have very fond memories there. But Asbury Park, there's something very majestic about that place.
Mm.
Oh, I'm gonna say Ocean City just because of memories, but that's rough. That's hard.
For me, it's Asbury Park because they have that giant like historic pinball parlor, and I could spend
Yeah,
days.
it's yeah. I get very nostalgic for New Jersey. It's a
Um,
very interesting state.
Bruce or Dave?
Mm, Bruce, Bruce,
Understood. I
Croft.
mean, I'm not 100% sure, but I think Dino Stamatopoulos's Starburns doing Dave in Community is probably a better Dave than Dave, but that's just me. Um,
Hmm.
80s Twilight Zone or Tales from the Crypt?
Tales from the Crypt.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, '80s Twilight Zone has a twinge of tragic, and it just doesn't beat the '60s Twilight Zone. If you said '60s Twilight Zone, it's an easy '60s Twilight Zone. But '90s Tales from the Crypt, '80s '90s, that was
Yeah.
just beautiful. It's peak. They're telling great stories.
Is there any room in in that pairing for Erie, Indiana?
The show Erie, Indiana, that was on Fox. I mean, I would say yes if Erie, Indiana was given more than one season.
Yeah.
You know, that show was just starting to. It was really starting to get good. It deserves an honorable mention.
There you go. You started to get to this one a little bit, but Bram Stoker's Dracula or Interview with the Vampire.
Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in Interview with the Vampire, it's just Tom Cruise isn't it's not right for Lestat, and it's the movie has issues. Whereas Bram Stoker's Dracula, everyone, yes, even Keanu Reeves, is really giving their all. Um, they're really giving their all in that film. Francis Ford Coppola is doing so many
Mm,
cool, artistic, like it's like a stage play. That movie, I love
yeah,
it.
and I mean, to be fair, like Gary Oldman can do anything.
Gary Oldman can do anything. I remember when he was cast, um, I was like, he's I think for me, Christopher Lee's my favorite Dracula because he's imposing.
Ooh,
Like
ooh,
there's an aspect to Dracula. I'm like, I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can take him in a fight. Like that should
yeah,
that there's the actual physical like, I don't know if I'm gonna come out on
yeah,
top and win this. That Christopher Lee brings that I didn't. Gary Oldman, we're around the same height, like, but there
yeah.
is still a terrifying, and this goes to the what a great actress can do. Um,
Mm,
yeah, his imposingness is it's not it's not physical. Gary Oldman definitely tapped into the metaphysical,
yeah.
which I don't think a lot of people really do, especially today with vampires. Of like, no, you're not human, and that's terrifying. Like I'm talking to something that
Mm.
I don't even know if it's breathing. What is that? You know what I mean? And Gary Oldman brings that across.
um, what do you think that Bram Stoker's Dracula had that Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was missing?
Oh, oof. Well, I feel like I think Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is science fiction,
Mm,
and Bram Stoker's Dracula is horror, right? They and like they
mm,
Mary Shelley's like goes into places of both, but the thing for me is Frankenstein to me isn't a threat. So I'm
mm.
not scared. I feel sorry for Frankenstein, or I'm sorry. I almost lost my nerd card. I feel sorry for Adam, the monster,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
the quote unquote monster. But
Yeah.
Adam's not. Adam is a newborn being trying to make sense of its existence in a world that hates it, and mankind is the horror. Right? That's the twist. That's just not scary to me.
Mm.
Dracula is something that's terrifying in the sense that I remember it was like um, it was in middle school when I first tried to fifth grade when I tried to get through that book. That was not for fifth grade reading
No.
level, and
No.
my mom got me this really cool version of the book that had illustrations, and I'm like, "What's a Romania? Why are all these letters? Why are there so
Ah!
many letters?" Um, but yeah, it opened my world. But I do remember reading like again Abraham Van Helsing is like
Yeah.
there was an urgency of like no we have to if you don't understand if we don't take care of this threat we're all done for and
Yeah.
that statement in a book is like okay yeah this is terrifying oh this thing is a virus
Mm.
it spreads and infects others it corrupts people
Mhm.
um, people that you knew and who were human in one book are not human in the next. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Lucy gets messed up,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Um, we see her, we see this woman go from full of life to sick to dead with a baby, you know, um, like
Yes.
to a baby eater. Like, oh, the implied history of all that. To me, it's like I was gonna tweet this. I think I will, and I still feel this, and I know I'm not alone. But I'm sure somebody's already written something on this. But I, the analogy between colonialism and vampirism
Mm.
to me seems to be very strong, interlinked of like, you know, this kind of aristocratic character who drains the life force out of his country and out of the people and their resources, and then comes to your neck of the woods to literally to drain the life force out of that place, and still retain power and youth and the myth of extravagance, right? Um, to me, yeah, there ain't nothing scarier than colonialism and white supremacy.
Wait, we're still talking about film, right? No, I'm just
Right, 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 right,
kidding.
right.
No, like in Philly where I'm located, there's a lot of conversation around redlining. And
Hmm.
I mean Tulsa's not the only neighborhood that bombed its own people. Like,
Nope, the roof is on fire.
nope, nope. Um, and then I was like, I mean that's what COVID is. Like,
Right.
COVID just saps the life out of people, and as you say, like we're pretending that it's over.
We're pretending that it's over, and so yeah, to me, it's akin to pretending like yeah, but it's so many, but it tracks, right? We pretend that's the American pastime.
Yeah.
Sadly, one of ours that's not so healthy. We like to pretend that horror doesn't exist. We put it in the margins. It's over there by the porn section. Let me tell
Hmm.
you, after working in a video store,
Yeah.
a lot of the most respected people you think they go to that porn section, and if they can afford it, they will have those movies delivered, right? Like,
Yes.
um, the stuff is always they also people go to the horror section. People go to the margins because
Yes.
you know they always have and they always will. The stuff, that stuff, good and bad, exists always, and if you ignore it, it only gets bigger.
Yes. There's I it was not my intention for us to have this incredible chat about the universal like system, but I'm just gonna lean into it. I, I guess we'll never find out. We'll never find out Buffy versus Vampire Diaries, but oh well. Um,
Oof. I mean, I was never into either.
yeah,
Um, there's something about Buffy I couldn't get into. I like the movie, the original
yeah,
movie.
yeah,
The TV show, there's something about it I couldn't get into, uh, and then yeah, I'm not one of those people who likes to pile on.
yeah,
But yeah, a lot of stuff tracks for why I wasn't into it. I'll just say that. And
yep,
Vampire Diaries. By that point, I was like, okay, hey, it's very CW, and um, you know,
yeah.
I like my vampires scary. You know,
Agreed. Um, is it time for a reboot of the Universal monsters? Like, is it time for another try at Creature, at Frankenstein, at Dracula?
but they keep trying it, and I think as long as I think the best if you're, I think it would work, but it has to come. I wouldn't call the movie Invisible Man or
Yeah,
um and I know they tried that recently. I wouldn't even I would it has to be a surprise for the people. And I wouldn't put any big stars in it. I wouldn't put Tom Cruise in The Mummy. Um like
yeah,
why would you do that? Like you really have to those universal monsters, Bram Stoker's Dracula was about immigration. It was about
Yes.
an influx of Eastern Europeans um, into England. That's what he was.
Yes.
Bram Stoker, an Irish immigrant,
Yes.
Irishman, was writing about the fear of Eastern Europeans and Jews. We got to be very the Jewish population.
Yes.
That's what that whole book is about. Um, what is that today? To me, Dracula is more akin to Trump and his corruption of people. And, I remember that vice presidential debate with Pence and Kamala Harris. And when the fly landed on Pence's head, I just remember being like, that dude's undead. And that dude is never a vampire. Like, that's never the
Mm,
vampire in a movie.
mm.
Brett Favre taking the resources from people in Mississippi who need those resources more than
Yes.
anything. Brett
Yes.
Favre is a vampire. So Dracula would look more like that, right? And I think that's a reboot that I would be interested in. Like the quarterback is the vampire, the Mr. America, salute and stands up straight, and that's the vampire.
Mm.
It's not it's not the dark, quote unquote dark, exotic, problematic stereotype of what a European is. It's us. And what do we do about it when it's us? Um and yeah, and then like that would be the angle I would start with Dracula, and then like what does that mean for the Invisible Man? Who is that? To me, the Invisible Man is someone who's definitely black, right? Um what is the mummy? We're dealing with, you know, we're dealing with ancient Egyptian culture. That has to be a story told from that perspective. Um and what that means. Um, Wolfman to me is just the about is white toxic masculinity, the rage of that,
Mm.
and like the freedom some people feel. Like that's what Trump unleashes, right? Like people feel an endorphin kick when like, oh man, I don't have to pretend to not be racist anymore. Oof. You couldn't keep that. You couldn't keep that. What is that? Why do you feel more free to do that? There's something really
Yeah.
scary there, right? Um, I didn't mean to actually give all my pitches on these monsters, but now I'm thinking about it, I'm just like, yeah, what is that? Frankenstein's a very different character now.
I think you need a meeting. Like we
Hmm?
like I think you need a meeting. Like we need to get a meeting set for you. Like you have a universal monsters like multiverse.
Yeah,
It's in your
apparently I
hands.
do. Yeah. Um, apparently it's been in there, just kicking around, and you asked the right question. But yeah, that would be my Universal monster reboot. Um,
Where is the Bride of Frankenstein in all of this?
I mean, the Bride of Frankenstein to me is that's monsters are an analogy for what we're going through right now, and like,
Mm. Mm.
uh I can't think of the Bride of Frankenstein without thinking about trafficking and Roe
Yes.
and
Yes.
that woman did not like the statement "She hate me," right? Spike Lee
Yeah.
made a movie called "She Hate Me." Like it's a
Yeah.
real that it was potent then. They knew what that meant then, um, and why that and Bride of Frankenstein is such a great sequel to a story of just like, oh, yeah, she's this
Yeah.
Frankenstein, the monster, Dr. Frankenstein, made a woman without her consent to mate with his monster, right?
Yeah.
That's a that's you don't I don't think you have to stray too far away from the source material.
Nope.
I think that story is still relevant. Um,
Care to
you
toss out a
know,
creature pitch as well?
from the Black Lagoon. I mean, I don't know if I'd be able to top Guillermo del Toro's Shape of
Ah,
Water.
it was
Um,
mm. Mwah, 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 mwah.
But I think, yeah, that was it, right? You know, that's an
Yes.
environmental. We are taking resources, and
Yes.
I would my thing, if I really wanted to make it horror, I'm just like, what who knows what happens when that thing, like, you can make it very alien, is
Yeah.
what I'm saying. You could
Yes.
that the creature from the Black Lagoon could be very alien, and you could do body horror, and it could be gross and
Hmm.
terrifying. And it's like, what the hell is this thing? Why did we unearth it, burn it, put it back? Well, it's too late now. Yeah, that would be my Universal Monsters pitch. I think we need to get back to. I can't believe a movie like The Thing was released in theaters, right? Like, people die horribly in that film,
Yes.
and I really, for me, I weirdly feel like we need to get back to. I feel like people are dying horribly in real life, but in movies, no one
Yes.
dies, and I'm like, no, that's got to be the flip. That's got to be the switch.
Another guest was talking about how there's just this preoccupation with Hollywood right now about like showing life and vitality and how well we can be and how triumphant we are over all things.
There's a definite theme to this conversation, um, and so I'm like, yeah, who's we? Who is we? I don't. I would. I know this sounds like old man shaking fists at screen, but I long for the days where I see people that look like people on screen. Like, to me, just a person
Yeah.
who doesn't have a gym membership to Equinox is revolutionary.
Yeah.
We talk about diversity, and diversity is important. Representation is important. I think Ariel is a black woman, and Little Mermaid
Mm.
is important. It needs to happen, right? Um, I also think just someone who knows how much they have in their bank account, who looks like a human being and doesn't isn't hair isn't coiffed and clothes aren't brand new, and seeing that person,
Yeah.
like, you wanna quell some of the people that Trump is infected. They don't see themselves. And I'm not trying to. I do not want to sympathize with those people in particular, but they're here, um, like all people. But I really feel like, in large, and I'm speaking specifically about here in the United States and North America, we don't like ourselves, and we don't see
Yeah.
ourselves in media anymore. And it's driving a lot of people crazy. And that's not to get more white people, middle American people on screen. But I mean, like, I do think there is a place of like, hey, but the average person who, like, Panera Bread is where they eat every day, because
Yeah.
it's cheap and affordable, and that's considered healthy because that's the food that's around. If they're in a food desert, that
Yeah.
person needs to be on screen.
Yeah.
The person that has to use the subway, even though people aren't wearing masks, that's the person I want to see be the hero in a movie. Um, I don't need to see the person who's, you know, uh, who, when the movie is over, like, they're also going to be on TikTok selling their album and performing, on a stage somewhere. Like, that person is very talented, and bless them, but that's not the average human being. That's not the average American.
Yeah.
Um, and until we start seeing ourselves again, until we start seeing the, like, oh, life is really precious on film, because when people get messed up, it is horrible, and it is not
Yeah.
desensitizing. It is in your face. It's immediate, and you don't want to see it again. I don't know. Maybe we'll start caring for each other again.
I hope. Um,
Hope.
I I want to call out, not to pivot too hard, but I do want to call out a way that I see work that you're doing that just show that to me expresses that care. Um,
Mm,
and I want to call
like,
out the work that you do with Freestyle Love Supreme and Amber Ruffin. I look at that show. I One of my favorite reviews of Amber Ruffin was that this is this is a project that Mr. Rogers would have been proud of. When I
mm,
hear people talking about Freestyle Love Supreme, um, one of my favorite reviews was that this is a place like thinking about how Tommy and Lynn cast people from the training academy like multiple times. Like this is a place where anything can actually happen. And I want to say, as someone who being yourself, who has had a role in cultivating that, in guarding those things, in crafting the narrative that both of those things bring to the public, and I mean the Freestyle Love Supreme community being one that has impacted me in a deeply personal way around my experience of accident recovery. I just want to say thank you.
oh, buddy, thanks, friend. Thank you. You've been integral to a lot of the stuff that I've been doing, especially in the pandemic. Um, you're a big part of the play that we did. Us invite, and so grateful to have your help and to know you.
I I'm just grateful that there's this opportunity in the work that I see you doing, that there's this opportunity for this really heavy shit, like, right, um like they're like these very deeply weighty things, but then there's the capacity to just turn around and to be able to set that aside at the same time. um
Mm.
i'm I'm wondering if it's hit you yet, about I- and we've talked about seeing ourselves on TV. So like that you stand in the lineage of like Wanda Sykes and Kevin Eubanks and like all like these luminary like black figures that have Larry Wilmore, like this is what maybe the I mean, because like Wanda's show was on a Saturday night, like and as a mid-season replacement on Fox.
Yep, and I
Like,
watched it.
con-
Yep, I remember.
yeah, like I still remember the first episode, like with Daryl Mitchell, like shortly after he'd had his accident and was in a chair.
Yeah, I
But it
remember
was
that
just
too. My God.
like
Yeah.
like just and I had just watched like his like reboot of Sergeant Bilko earlier in the day, and he was like but yeah,
It's great.
like you has it hit you yet that's a space like that you live in now?
Um, that's very kind of you. No, I mean, because I think it's still a struggle, right? Like
Yes.
I acknowledge that, and I'm very honored to even be thrown in that grouping. I don't consider myself honestly like yeah, I don't know if I consider myself to be. That hasn't felt real yet. It feels more
Yeah.
like, all right, let's get this every day. Every day we're on set is it's as fun as it is, as much of a blessing as it is. It's also work. Like we are,
Yes.
it's work to get people to know who we are. Um,
Mhm.
Amber is, it's my sister, and it's a delight to work with, and she's such a dynamo. And personally, I'm just like, I want everyone to know who she is, and
Yeah.
um, I'm like feel like I'm still a small part of that. Um, but like that's in this world where there's so much going on and there's so much noise, and um, you know, we are coming up on season 3, and um, finding out like Samantha Bee is not going to be on the air anymore, and
Yes.
Desus and Mero, and the
Yes.
landscape that we're in is changing, and it was diverse, and now it's almost regressing a little bit. So
Yeah.
it definitely feels very special, but we're so I guess I'll speak for myself. We're so in it that I'm like, I let's just keep surviving, and maybe we can look back and be like, oh wow, like we can look over the valley and see like, oh this is how far we've come. For right now, I'm just like, we are still getting through it. If that makes
Um
sense.
yeah. Like you're still in the trenches. Like
Yeah, we
every
still in.
I mean there's something that I remember from like earlier in the chat that just like the act of survival is just this incredible act of resistance and of triumph.
Yeah, it's you know everything we've been talking about is has been like you said, it's an act of resistance. It's bucking against what was set before. We were not supposed to be in conversation, like
Yeah.
using the structure that was set before. And so us talking is revolutionary. Us
Yeah.
taking up space, us using our voices is revolutionary. And there's a reward in that, but it's not easy. It's difficult.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to take up space, especially um when the system wasn't built for you.
Mhm. Thank you for taking up space. Thank you for letting me to take up some of your space and to share it with you. We're very close to the end of our time, so I just have one last question to ask you. The same
Yeah.
last question that I ask everybody. What do you want the world to look like when you're done with it?
What do I want the world to look like when I'm done with it? I think my go-to answer was like, I used to use the analogy of, and I think I'm not alone. I think I got this from Muhammad Ali. It's like, you want to leave the room better than you left it, right?
Hmm.
Better than you know the analogy. It's the world's a hotel room. You get there, it should look better when you leave. I still believe that, but I do. I think for me, more importantly, there's a. I don't think the word is common or humble, but there is a. We really love flashy things right now.
Yeah.
We really love highly polished. Um, if you are popular, um, like you get, I always think it's funny that rich people get more free things.
Yeah.
You know
Oh
what I
my
mean?
God. Yes.
Like celebrities get a bunch of free things, and rich people get a bunch of free things, and
Yeah.
there are people in the state of Mississippi who do not have water to drink. Right?
Yes.
Whatever that is, I want the opposite of that. That's what I want the world to look like. My good friend Don Hooper, who's a writer, is in the was has a chapter in the book Black Boy Joy. That was a New York Times bestseller, and his chapter was "I got me a
Yeah.
jetpack." Right, my favorite chapter in the book. But that was a statement that he and I used to joke about because we would say, you know, society tends to give a boost to people who have jetpacks. That was like
Yeah.
our inside joke. You got a jetpack? Hey, guess what? Everybody's going to give you a hand. We're going to help you get up there. And it's like that person has a jetpack. The people who don't, the people who are in the trenches, um, they're the ones who need help. I've been one of those people. Sometimes I think I still am that person. Um, that's our mandate. There's no other mandate here but to help those other people out. That's what we got to do. Like, and then check in with yourself, help yourself. 3 M's: mask up, meditate, and check in with yourself. Be in your own team and mind your business. But I would say the last one is also just like, uh, you got to help that person who doesn't have a jetpack.
Tarik Davis, thank you so much for being on the show, for being a beloved collaborator and friend, and thank you for the work that you continue to do.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. This was so much fun. Thanks for having me.
My thanks to my guest, Tarik Davis. You can follow Tarik on Instagram and Twitter at Tarik R. Davis. Tarik R. Davis. Catch new episodes of The Amber Ruffin Show on Fridays, streaming only on NBC's Peacock. Thanks for tuning in to Uncommon Good with Polly Reese. This program is produced in Southwest Philadelphia on the unceded land of the Lenni Lenape tribe and the Black Bottom community. If you enjoyed listening to the show, please support us by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment and subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps people find us. Uncommon Good is also available on YouTube and Instagram. Follow us there for more accessible video content and some goodies too. We love questions and feedback. You can send us a DM on Instagram or an email at uncommongoodpod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, wishing you every uncommon good, to do your uncommon good, to be the uncommon good. Hey fam, it's Polly. If you liked that video, want to join the conversation, be part of this community, click the subscribe button so you don't miss a thing uncommon good. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.